I am Evan Sachs with the Washington Heights-Inwood Mask Block. I am here today with Kyle Stevens, the founder of Clean Air Events out on the West Coast. And you can find them on Instagram. We'll pop that in the doobly doos when this goes out. So would you like to introduce yourself and how you got started with Clean Air Events?
Totally. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. First off, I really appreciate being here. My name is Kyle Stevens. I'm the founder of Clean Air Events, which is a clean air focused event production company and project in Seattle. Started off with far UVC mitigations for weddings and events, and then slowly have transferred, or while still also doing events for other people, for corporations and private events, doing a series starting this summer called Clean Air Events Presents, and where we bring in different acts of COVID-aware artists and groups, and we provide all the things, all the mitigations, and turn this kind of black box theater space into a really cool COVID-aware person's dream venue is the goal with that.
Yeah, that is so amazing. And what first got you really aware and active about clean air? Was it with the pandemic? Was it before?
Yeah, I wish I could say it was before, but so much of the past 5 years has been like a learning curve for me with clean air, with the way, a clean air community starting there and then exploring, of course, how marginalized communities have been treated in our society and our country forever. And as I always kind of not joke, but just kind of where I'm coming from is like I used to in the before times, I was a front person for a rock band. So, so cishet white dude in the middle of a stage, right? Like how much more privilege can you get than that in the entertainment industry? And just in general. And so a lot of this past 5+ years for me has been unlearning and deconstructing privilege and seeing how that fits within the clean air community and marginalized communities in my area. And so what I've really, I've remained very COVID aware throughout the entirety of the ongoing pandemic. My wife has gone through cancer treatment. We've had a kiddo. We've had all these things that have, we would have continued had those things not been in play. But those things specifically, to me, opened up how much of a need there is to advocate for yourself and advocate for yourself, especially in an ongoing pandemic in this nexus that so many of us find ourselves in. We all come from different walks of life, financial privilege, color of your skin privilege, where station in life, education, resource levels. But where we all group together as a COVID-aware clean air community, I find is really wanting to help each other evolve and stay safe. And so that's where Clean Air Events came from, is with my background of entertainment and rock and roll, how could I take that and put that into what I feel I would want to see as somebody who went to something like one of my shows?
Yeah, that's so amazing. I mean, you always wish for better circumstances to learn these things, but we've got what
Hmm.
we've got, right?
Yeah, what we got? Yeah.
Yeah, so like clean air events, from what I understand, y'all lend out various tools to venues, businesses, individuals, etc., to help, you know, if they're doing an event, help improve the air quality at the event. What kinds of things do you do? Do you
Right.
lend out?
Yeah, so we're not, so to clarify, we're not like a mask block or a air purifier block where we kind of lend stuff out where I know certain businesses run like that. We're more like a vendor. Like think of us like a wedding vendor or an event vendor where people say, I have this many people, excuse me, I want to provide this level of mitigation, but I don't know where to start. Where can I start, right? And of course, my first thing would be like, have everyone wear a mask at this place. But that's not going to happen in the vast array of circumstances. So I will say, so we have air purifiers and we could show up with those and we put those in different areas of your room. I walk people through what it would be like to I go to the venue and I say, so what is the airflow situation here? What windows can we open? Where are people mostly going to be gathered? And we kind of look at like what can we do to provide like a clean air relay? How can we provide fans to blow air or suck in air from the outside by putting a fan up against the window? What can we do to keep the CO2 levels down? And specifically where I feel like Clean Air Events kind of like separates itself a little bit from what traditionally has been offered is we offer high levels of premium far UVC UV clean air technology. The 222 band, UV band, for some of your listeners who might not be familiar, is the only UV band that is safe to be around for the skin or the eye. There's UVA, UVB, UVC, and the 222 nanometer bands, this little sliver that is still the exponential cleaning power of UVC, but can't go through the outer layer of your skin or your eye, thusly not causing cancers or skin issues, but cleans the room, cleans surfaces, and is one of the Swiss cheese models of mitigation, Swiss cheese model effect in this ongoing pandemic that is not the tragedy of RUVC is it's not accessible to all people at this point. But what we try to do is raise awareness to the different levels of UVC that is available by working with companies as a third party vendor, helping just kind of spread the word about, rich people have been using this stuff for years. And so what we're trying to do is take it to our communities on a grassroots level and say, hey, that everyone is deserving of this technology. Here's how it works. And hopefully you go to your traditional music venue or your doctor or your dentist or your school and be like, what's up with this? Why don't we have this? And so it's kind of to provide mitigations and also, in a good way, rile people up to be like, hey, I'm deserving of this stuff. We're all deserving of this stuff. Why is this not here? Why are you not hip to this yet? And so, yeah, we'll provide many Far UVC brands from Sterile Ray to Far UV Technologies to Eden Park to BioAbundance. They all serve a different purpose, a different tool for a different room or a different level of population that's in said party or family gathering. So it's just kind of like this puzzle that I like figuring out. And I find people like working with me to figure it out as well because they educate themselves to how this can work. And then they get to talk to their friends when they have their party, be like, hey, look at this, and a lot of it's just one conversation at a time, I find.
Yeah, oh, I feel that about having conversations. And,
Mhm.
speaking of conversations, one of the things that you just mentioned was the Swiss cheese layered model, which I feel
Mhm.
like a lot of us COVID conscious folks know what that is. But for folks who are like, what's that and how do I implement it? Could you mind going into a little bit more detail?
Yeah, so we think of like a Swiss cheese block, right? And there's different slices, and I'm hungry, right? We're talking about cheese, but we got we got different different holes in different areas. And so the idea is if something fails, what's the next thing that catches it? What's the overlap where it can't fall through that hole? So say, having airflow is one of them. Great. We want to have airflow in a room where people gather, bring the CO2 levels down, because as we know, high CO2 levels are easily able to transmit virus. More virus hangs in the room as opposed to moving all around with natural airflow. And then we have masking, of course. The more people wear masks, the better. One-way masking, effective. Not anywhere as good, obviously, as if everyone was masking in that room. And investing in each other. So that's what we try to encourage well, we require masking at our shows, 100% KN95 plus required masking. But for other people's shows, we're like, hey, we'd start here. Okay, you don't want to do that? Okay, well, let's look at air purifiers. And then if the air purifier fails, then we've got far UVC. And then, of course, hand washing and everything there, but that doesn't really help for an airborne virus. But, people understand hand washing to a degree. I say to a degree because I still see stuff everywhere where they don't understand hand washing. But, there's different levels and it's just all learning and a willingness to learn. And I think in many ways, that's where maybe people have not gotten to the level of understanding the Swiss cheese mitigation effect because that wasn't really, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, introduced to the populace as a theory until like maybe late 2021, early 2022. And then by that point, many people were kind of like vaxxed and relaxed. So they really haven't had an opportunity to dive into and learn. I think many times, though, it's not an exclusive group. There's no secret handshake, but the COVID aware community is kind of on a different operating system, I think, having evolved, since we've learned all these things over the past 5+ years. And so I know talking through conversations like this at my clean air event shows, so many of it is just kind of waiting for an opportunity to have these discussions with people. Is the info dump that we have is large, but piecing it out, I think, is tactful when we have the opportunity.
Yeah, agreed, agreed. And yeah, my admittedly faulty memory, I have a vague recollection of the Swiss cheese model really, coming into my consciousness like around vaccine time because that's when it
Yeah,
became like really important that, oh wait, you shouldn't just vax and relax. The vaccines are one layer, an important layer, but not the only
yeah,
one, you know.
yeah. And the vaccines out of that Swiss cheese mitigation model, excuse me. Yes, of course, vaccines. If you're able to go get vaccinated and boosted and whatever, wherever you are in your series right now, highly encourage people to do that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And you were also talking about like this amazing UVC technology, and how it's not as widely accessible as perhaps it should or could be. Do you
Hmm.
want to talk a little bit more about what exactly that is and, how people can either access it as individuals or advocate for it, like you said, at their doctor's offices or at other organizations?
Yeah, I feel like in many ways when people hear UV, it's a scary thing. We know we don't want to be staring at the sun. We don't want to be in a hospital room when they turn on the UV cleaner. We are aware of UV at the movie theaters when it's, 20 feet up and it's away from people, so they don't have to be worried about it. But I find it's just a learning curve for people to understand. Especially, I feel like it's a technology that can be embraced by people who, don't mask, can't mask, are in situations, workplaces, or family situations where it's not safe to. And again, it's part of that Swiss cheese mitigation effect where it's not the cure-all, it's not the magic bullet, just like we wish everything else was, but it's not. But it's a very, very powerful tool, though I'd say the most expensive of the tools. And so when I say that, I kind of equate it to when flat screen TVs first came out. And they were kind of hard to find and or hard to access. They're pretty expensive, but the more people tuned into them and adopted that technology, then the cheaper the price came down. I think it's a metaphor that a lot of people use for the far UVC space, especially in the Time magazine article, the Wired and Vox articles that recently came out, that the adaptivity of it is going to lead to more accessibility. And so that's a puzzle. How can we solve that? And I think that's just solving or beginning to step in the direction of solving that with education. So there's different levels of lamps. For example, New Kit, a woman out of Singapore, excuse me, China, makes a thing called the New Kit torch, and it's four little torches that are 3 watt units, and they cover about 3 feet each, and they disinfect in 2 to 3 minutes, right? And as we know, COVID can transfer much quicker than that. Someone's right across from you. But I think of that level of privacy as kind of like a Roomba. Kind of like, it's not going to get all your carpet at once, but it's kind of working around the room, touching on everything. That's what I think of that accessibility of far UVC like at that level. And that level is usually about like 399 for the pack of those four. And then we go all the way to something like the Sterile Ray Saber, which is, I'd say up in there in like the $2,500 category, which can disinfect everything in 1 second, up to 75 feet. So if you set a far UVC unit like that up in a room in a corner, everything in a 160-degree viewpoint from that will get cleaned in 1 second, shooting straight out into that room. Because think of it like at bats in baseball. You have a certain number of at bats to hit the ball. Every second, you have a million at bats of photons. And what these photons do is they shoot out and they engage with the virus and they kill the part of the virus that can infect you, the protein area. And so if it was in the room and you breathed it in, it wouldn't infect you because the idea is that it's already killed in like the part that can latch onto you. So because of that, far UVC, it can't go through the skin or the eye, which is why it's safe to be around. It can't go through people. So say if you have like a group of people, it's shining out, but every time it hits somebody, it stops and it moves through all the gaps of people. And every second, there's a new million photons that fly out. Now, the way far UVC is best used is when you have it from different angles of a room. So say if you have one in the upper right corner of a square and it's shooting down. Well, everything behind people down in that lower left quadrant isn't going to be reached because it's stopped by the bodies. But if you put one in the lower left quadrant and the upper right quadrant, it's hitting it from every single angle. And so even better than that is if you have it in the lower right quadrant. So you have three. And even better than that is if you have it in the corner. So think of it like a James Bond movie or video game when you want to hide from the turret that's scanning you, like a weapon turret or like a video camera, and you got to hide behind a box or something like that. You want far UVC to see you. So the more you have it available in every corner to take care of what we call shadow blocking, it can be attacking from all angles. And that is the safest way you can implement that technology, where nothing is shadowed, everything's covered, and wherever people might be turning and talking, if they're spreading disease, it is being blocked. Excuse me, it's not being blocked because it's being hit from every corner by light.
That's so amazing. And it sounds like probably the most accessible option for like just individuals is probably the new kit, which how do you spell
Yeah. It's got NUKIT, so New Kit Torch. New Kit Technologies, I believe, is the brand. And then there's the middle lanes as well, middle lanes with Eden Park, which can take care of stuff in like 10 to 20 seconds, or Far EV technology, which can take place in 7 to 10 seconds. So kind of basically the more the price goes up in those kind of items, the quicker it disengages virus.
Yeah, that's really amazing to know. And of course, for the really high-end stuff you were talking about, I imagine that's really expensive, probably not doable for the individual, but
Yeah,
possibly doable for a company or a larger
correct.
doctor's office or some other larger organization. Uh, um, do you have any experience advocating for, individual organizations or governments or whoever else to institute some of these precautionary measures in their offices or other places of work?
I do. Yeah. Thanks for asking. What I find is, I guess surprisingly, not surprisingly, is the people that are adopting this technology in business are often small businesses, mom and pop entities, people who need to, acquire certain kind of resources every month through sales or tickets that then keep their business running. They can't afford to get sick. They can't afford to shut down. So places like that, I think, really have an incentive to make sure that they invest in this technology and learn about it. I do consultations all the time with private homes and companies, and walk through what exactly their space looks like, what they're hoping to do, work through budget, and kind of like help pick the best lamp for the bang for the buck for what their specific goals are. So, for example, there's a Christmas tree farm in Maine that I did consulting for last year. They wanted to make sure that a husband-wife team who owns this Christmas tree farm, and the kind of the POS point of sale area where people would walk through this horseshoe. They'd pass the wreath station, they'd pass the cocoa area, they'd pass the place where they'd pay for the tree. That was always kind of like a nexus of infection that they were concerned about. They want to keep their employees working. They wanted to make sure that they protected their guests, and they implemented FAR EVC kind of surrounding this room. And to my understanding, they had the least amount of employee absences they ever had in that last 23-24 season. So that's really, really cool to hear that stuff. I love hearing how it's worked out for people, after the fact. And so I think when people realize that they have these experiences with these kinds of technologies, even if they're not masking, they can start to put the pieces together. Okay, what was different about this? Okay, I'm not masking. The pandemic isn't over, despite what they may be told. I think people know deep down it's not. They see it everywhere, the signs that it's not. People like us masking, right? Talking about FAR EVC. And so I think that, though we wish masking was a part of everyday carry for so many people, these kind of mitigation measures, I think, are there for people to tune into that area of it. So, as we talk in the COVID aware community, perfection isn't the goal, but putting your best foot forward in the way you're able to should be, I believe.
Yeah, that's such an important goal to say, like, hey, I understand that you might not be able to do X, Y, or Z because of
Mhm.
ABC situation, or, you just get some people who aren't willing to, even if they can, and you can't control other people. So,
Yeah,
it's so important to say, like, hey, like, something is better than nothing. And,
totally.
yeah. Like a lot of what I hear personally, at least, both talking to people for this podcast and just generally, like, you know, being in COVID smart spaces and such is so many people, even if, they themselves are immunocompromised or have a family member that they're advocating for who is particularly vulnerable for one reason or another, they often have trouble even at doctors' offices saying like,
Yeah,
"Hey, I need you to protect me or protect my wife or protect my mom." Hey,
yeah.
do you have any experience with like, hey, like like people like me are able to talk to, doctors' offices or whoever, or I have experience with like trying to convince a particular practice to do something that, you think may be useful for other people.
Yeah, I think it's one of the hardest things. For COVID aware people to deal with is how to ask for the care that we all deserve in a way that doesn't make you feel like you're doing a special ask or they're doing you a favor. I think for many times when we talk about these things or we we ask doctors or healthcare facilities especially to take additional mitigations from what they would normally provide when we're there, it seems like we are doing too much when in fact I believe we're educating them to what they should already be doing. So, for example, I have a dentist appointment tomorrow, so great timing. I talk to people about this stuff all the time, but I still find myself kind of nervous when I ask people because I don't know how it's going to be received. And I find myself lately is not really like going into details or just asking for permission. I would just say, I would like you to please wear a high quality mask when I'm in there. And I just do it nicely and I start at that place. And I find if you're just kind of confident and you kind of just stick up for what you need, often that will do the job. I find. And if not, there's always ways we can say, I'm sorry, I'd love to come in, but I'm just not comfortable unless you mask for me. And I haven't had a problem with that in the past, and I really hope that you could help me in that way. I feel like I'm sure you've experienced this as well, is like people want to help, even though they might not feel like they need to do that for them, even though they do. Like we're all susceptible to viruses in the same way. I feel like, the way the public in general has been propagandized and kind of like slow boiled to abandoning COVID mitigations, it can be upsetting to bring these things up to people sometimes. But I do believe that the majority of healthcare providers, though they might seem uncomfortable or act weird when you talk to them, I think they know that's still there, and it kind of helps them kind of me projecting perhaps touch base with their own kind of maybe undealt with trauma of how they're hoping that maybe they had a better work situation that took care of them or they had the confidence to stick up in that way. I don't think we can undervalue what each little interaction can do in the chain of good transmission, I guess I should say, in kind of showing what we can communicate and stick up for and how we can stick up for each other and kind of lead the way for that until business gets behind it, and going back to what we talked about of people going at it their own with far UVC or these mitigations. My goal, even though we're a business and we are working to provide these mitigations for events, I would love it someday if we were out of business and venues just took care of this stuff on their own. Like that's the ultimate goal for what I do, where we don't need to have these conversations about what can we do to stick up for each other because that you're going to go there and it's going to be taken care of. So that's the goal. How we get there, I'm not sure, but I think it's one day at a time.
Yeah, I feel you like planting those little seeds that you hope one day will grow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say, kind of a little trick is, people when they take far UVC if you're gonna take far UVC to a dental appointment or something like that, is they say like, do I need to ask permission? Because it's kind of like it's a not well-known technology, right? The one time for what it's worth, I've asked permission, it hasn't worked. Every other time I've just set it up and not said anything, it's fine. I think in the way that people don't want to know that we're still in a pandemic and don't want to know about masks and don't want to know about far UVC for the most part works in our benefit in this way because you can just do your thing and not talk about it. And it's ridiculous, but I find that works if people have any questions in that arena.
Man, like I have had such a similar experience with the mask block where, one of my strategies has been to ask, local public officials, hey, will you stock up masks from my mask block to distribute? And every time, like whether it's a library or like a local officials district office, if I call in advance and say, hey, like I have this stuff, even if it's like directly from HHS or whatever, like, and say, can I bring it to you? The answer is inevitably no. But like, if I just show up with a giant bag and say, hey, want this? Want to give it to people? And they'll say, okay,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
which
Yep.
it,
That makes sense to me.
yeah, it's really amazing, and I have yet to figure out why that is, but here we are. Um,
When you do, let me know, please.
yeah.
Let us know.
Yeah, and if you figure out before I do, I'd like to know as
I
well.
promise. I promise.
Yeah, but so yeah, we talked a little bit about like affordable ways individuals can afford things like UVC technology, even if it's not perfect. What is these days, unfortunately.
Mhm, mhm.
We also I recently talked with some folks who, work on making their own Corsi Rosenthal boxes or AKA homemade
Awesome.
air purifiers.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you found is particularly helpful in terms of, either DIY or finding affordable items in terms of like air purifiers and such?
Yeah, I mean, there are people that are a lot more tuned in than I am to assembling and the best fans to use for Corsi Rosenthal boxes. And I'm a big fan of people who do that. Clean Air Kits is great. There's tutorials all over YouTube. I think the cheapest one I saw people put together was like $25 for like basically filters and a computer fan on top and putting together a Corsi Rosenthal box. And so those tutorials and those things are out there. I think, to answer your question, one thing I think that we forget, well, we don't forget, but how does it apply to far UVC and these like more costlier clean air mitigation tools is that capitalism will tell us we have to go at everything alone, right? Like every family needs to have a far UVC thing if you're going to make this work. And that's not true. It's like how many are we all getting together all the time in the COVID work community and testing every single day for dinners? I don't think many of us are. I don't think many of us are having families always over at the same time or going to an Airbnb the same weekend. And so I always ask people to say, recommend people, excuse me, to think about is do you have in your COVID aware, just community bubble, what can you guys do to go in on these kind of tools yourself where it works out like maybe like even for the biggest, most powerful lamp, like what, $75 a family? And then you kind of have like a sign up sheet that people use at different times of the weekend, a different week or different month. Um, I think things are more accessible in that way and not really feeling like we just need to be in our own private lanes. And I think that for many of us, I mean, many of us were tuned into this in the before times as well, but like people like myself, admittedly, who was not so tuned into mutual aid and not so tuned into the lanes of community care and these communities that have existed forever that I now find myself in, is that I'm trying to say, excuse me, that there's many ways to go about it, and it's not just basically stocking up and being like, I got mine, right? That we can go in on these things together and make sure that we are taking care of each other in the ways that we can and get creative in how to best access these tools. Same thing for air purifier, same thing for masks. Maybe someone got a super good deal on the government mask that went out, I think it was in spring or early summer when the government was getting rid of all those tests. And people would just sign up for 3,000 of them and have like a pallet show up at their house. We were one of them. He's like, okay, we have 3,000 tests. Are we going to use these? Hell no. Who needs them? Like summer camps, COVID aware groups, mask blocks, great. And then people distributed everything. The same thing can be done for every other technology. It's just being creative with how we do it.
Right. Yeah, that HHS program, it had to be late winter, early spring because that's actually
Yeah.
how my mask block got started
Oh,
was
good.
somebody had posted it in still COVID in New York City and I was like, what the hey? I'll give it a try, see if it works. I'll be the guinea pig for the group here. And
Yeah.
sure enough, like the minimum order was 300. 300 showed up at my teeny apartment doorstep, and I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna start this thing I've been talking about. So
Good. That's how you do it.
yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, but yeah, that like it's really is something important to note is that, you know, a anybody can do mutual aid in some ways. Of course, some mutual aid is easier than others, of course, but
Hmm.
it's something that your average everyday Joe can do if they're feeling like they need to do something. Yeah, and
100%.
yeah. So, in terms of what you do when you're sussing out, okay, what might this space need for a given event that you've been hired for?
Yeah.
What are the processes like that you go through? Do you bring a CO2 monitor? What else do you do?
Yeah, I'll take a CO2 monitor like right here, the internet floor, like I have in my office right here. I'll explain to people what it is, like what I'm doing. Most of the time, my contacts when I do these kinds of events are like the one COVID aware person in their organization, and they're the ones who kind of fought for it through HR, and HR is just like, all right, go for it, do whatever you got to do. And so they're very excited to be able to kind of show what they know and what they've learned and apply it to their workspace and their coworker environment. Yeah, so I'll go in there. I'll take a look at the different rooms. Like, is it one room? Is it two? Is it two floors? How open air is this? Where people are going to gather? Where's the bar area for kind of corporate events? Where's the eating and mingling area? Is there a side room that maybe people are going to gather in? And so, with the tools that I have, kind of map out where the best place would be to place these, communicate to the vendor contact. What my plan is, and most of the time they're just like, go for it. But it's kind of a leap of faith, I think, for a lot of these corporations to trust. I'm glad they do, the COVID aware individual that works for them, their contact, because I think corporations want to do something, but I think they're trying to figure out what that looks like always. They know it's not requiring masking. They don't want to be seen as not caring at all. But for example, one time, like just this past spring, they hired me with air purifiers for this room, right? And a couple of far UVC lamps. But then the contact was like, I don't want people to see these air purifiers. I want you to put them somewhere. So we ended up putting them was like pointless. Like it's like this, why even have this here? So I think it's important that there's somebody who's as again, the contact for these organizations that know what they're doing, can advocate, has a strong voice to be in the mix when aesthetic comes into play, and let people know that it's an important part of aesthetic. And really, I think people are generally thankful and curious if they do see mitigations, especially if they haven't seen them for a long time, or they have them at their home and don't expect them. Right? The bar is low. The bar of expectation is low. So if you have one thing, it's like people are excited about that. If you bring all the things, it's like, what is this wonderland for COVID aware people?
Yeah, and you mentioned aesthetics.
Yeah.
Do you have any strategies or any particular tools you use when you're dealing with a client who's like, well, I'm really worried about how this is going to look. Do you have any particular way of dealing with that, or any way you can make this feel like, oh, well, this is kind of nice looking or whatever?
Yeah, my air purifiers are just like black and white boxes, and so it's like I don't know how much more stark or minimalist we can get for that. I think a lot of times it's people kind of working through their own feelings about just air purifiers in general and all the things, and so once we kind of get that in place, usually not a big deal. But with the far UVC light specifically, a lot of times people are worried that it's gonna be like projecting light, like a spotlight, like a purple blast everywhere. And the way far EBC works is you want to have it 8 to 9 feet up in the air, and that way it is not shadow blocking, coming down, hitting people from all angles, accessible that high. And so they don't even see it when I set it up, actually. They go, so where's the far UVC? And I say, right there, because they're not looking, right? They're looking eye height. And they look up and they can see it, and the glow, the luminescence is only as like not even the exit sign in the venue, like not even the open sign on the front door. It's just like a soft purple glow. And they say, that's it. I'm like, yep, that's it. And then it kind of their nervous system seems to relax if they're not tuned into the stuff. If they are tuned into it, they're very excited.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Yeah, and hey, let's see. Is there anything else that I'm missing that you really wanted to talk about?
Yeah, so we talked about the mitigations we provide for weddings and events like that. What we're really excited about this past year, starting in July, we had another one in August. Just finished our newest one this past weekend is the Clean Air Event Series in Seattle. I can confidently say there is nothing like this in the world at this point. We're the first people to provide a specific and intentional COVID aware clean air event series. So what we do kind of to walk through that mitigation strategy again is KN95 plus required masking for everybody. This isn't something where people show up and if they don't do it, we're just like no, we go up and we say we need to put on a mask, please. And if, we haven't had this to date, so knock on all the things, people have been great. But if they have a problem with that, then we have a security team that invites them to leave. Because what we do is we're setting up an environment where people know to go and they know that it's going to be as safe as you can get. We say COVID's safer because nothing's 100%. But what we do is we have this black box theater in Lower Queen Anne, the Seattle area, every month on a Sunday, once a month, where we turn it into a music space. So we bring in all my equipment as a professional DJ, my sound system, my lights. We bring in a professional sound person from the biggest club in Seattle, the Showbox, where all the big acts come through. So they're getting premium sound experience. We are providing the far UVC light, and we design that if you're on stage looking out on either side of the speakers, so it's shining out to the crowd. And then we have a far UVC bubble surrounding the performers right there behind us. And I can provide you with some photos as well if you want to use them with anything with the advertising for the podcast. I'd be happy to do that. But my goal is you walk in and you're just like, what is this? Like, you know what it is, but like, why is this not everywhere? And to exceed expectations, we have a photo booth there. Performers are required to mask. A lot of places I notice are starting to have, performers do plus life testing and then perform unmasked, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The brand that we want to do is saying, what can we do if from the moment we get in there to the end of the show, everyone's on this even playing field? And so we require, like I said, masking. We have complimentary N95 masks at the front if people want. We have N95s. I'm sorry, we have earplugs. We have the ability for if the lights are flashing too much, people come up and let us know sometimes like, hey, I can't deal with this. I'm like, no problem. Let's make them neutral and just make it accessible across the board. I think the next level for the COVID aware community is not just like, is it COVID accessible? Is it clean air accessible? Is it accessible for people with sensory challenges? Is it accessible for ADA access, which this show is? What is the restroom situation? Does it have all gender inclusive bathrooms? That's what we've set up at this show. So we're trying to hit all these points and then also knowing like, hey, we might mess it up too, but to establish a community where people are like, we're doing the best job that we can until we know there's something better we can do. And then trust us to then implement that and create this kind of mutual respect between client base and organization. So, people say all the time, we wish we had this in New York. We wish they had this in LA or Miami or Houston. I would love to do that. I'm trying to figure out how to how to do that. I don't know how I can be putting me in different places as I'm not traveling right now with planes and stuff, but it's kind of a dream to have, every market be able to have a clean air events, and then obviously every small town have that. But before then, not be systemically failed and make sure that corporations and entities invest in this stuff so we don't even have to think about this, right? That's the goal.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, and I feel you on the planes. I am not doing planes for the foreseeable future. They were stressful enough before. But yeah, I'm actually very curious. What have you found the most success with in terms of being able to enforce these kinds of masking requirements, etc., at events? Because I know certainly a lot of organizations, even when they are trying their ding dang darndest, have trouble with that. But
Yeah.
it sounds like you have had some success.
We have, and to be honest, we haven't really been challenged on that in real time. We're very fortunate to have a very strong still COVID community in the Seattle area, King County, Snohomish County, extending all the way to Pierce County, the Tacoma area, south of Seattle, Oregon, kind of in this I-5 corridor. It's kind of like the movie Walking Dead, where there's little satellites of villages and people that have figured it out, and then they kind of compare notes, and they all exist, but they're kind of in the same places. I like to think we're the walking informed, but basically through that corridor of like an hour north and an hour south, 3 hours south, there's a lot of events always happening. There's roller skating nights, there's children museum nights, and you see an overlap of these folks. I've never seen somebody show up and argue about masks. I've never seen somebody give organizers a bad time. I know that is not par for the course. I know that's not normal. And so I'm very thankful for the privilege that we haven't had to deal with that. But I think for people who are looking to maybe do these things, Before I knew people would go along with it without some trolls or pushback, the plan was just letting people know again and again, over and over again, this is a required event. This is what required means. This is what we will do if we have to remind people. And, we're not here to be cops, but we're here to make sure that people uh, are enjoy an experience that they are using their hard-earned resources for, and they know what they're going to get, and not something where they're going to show up and they're going to be uncomfortable to speak out, or they see us uncomfortable. That's out of the equation. Like, just show up and have a good time and let your nervous system come down. And that is some of the biggest compliments we've received of people saying it's a glimpse of how I used to feel, or someone who's extremely immunocompromised saying, I haven't been anywhere to stuff like this. I only came here because of the far UVC on top of everything else. And so that's why we're doing it, is to build community and show that there is a way, and we just don't have to like be giving up one by one and succumbing to a world that desperately wants us to pretend that this isn't still happening, and to just like really fight back in a way that's positive and productive.
Oh, that is so amazing to hear. That like really warms my heart. Yeah, and you're saying that also you require the performing artists to mask, and
Yeah.
I do know, like living in New York, having a lot of musical theater and just theater in general
Yeah.
friends. Our last episode was a very wonderful opera singer who lives in the neighborhood here. And there is often a lot of pressure to say, hey, like, I want to see your face. I want you to, match with the other choral singers if it's a chorus, etc. What would your advice be both to performers who, are struggling with ways to keep themselves safe while practicing their art, and also to folks who, run theaters or venues, etc., in terms of like keeping the talent safe?
Yeah, I feel like where I have seen success, or a version of success for myself, and where I see it with other people, is a commitment to, here's what we're going to do. Like, this isn't for everybody, maybe. And that's not a choice that everyone can make, right? Because like you have to pay the rent on your venue, or you have to keep your show going, or maybe it's worth it for you to lose your show if you wanted to stick with the integrity of your vision, right? There's no perfect solution here, right? So again, systemic failure has all led us to this place and abandonment where we have to have these conversations because we need to. We need to figure this out as an art community. What I think is interesting is the majority of the time when I have seen people double down and saying we're going to have required masking, we're going to have our artist masks, we're going to have, if not that, plus life testing for everybody. Here's what we're going to do. A theater that I work with recently had a performer come in and they were COVID positive upon plus life testing. And they said, okay, that performer is not in the event anymore. And everyone in this venue, even the people who didn't traditionally mask, are now masking tonight for this. And so I think often when people feel personally threatened, even though they're not very COVID aware or informed, that can make them feel like as long as all their buddies are doing it, they can wear a mask as well. It's kind of a side tangent here we're getting on, but to say, what is your vision? Because I feel like there are so many COVID aware people who are looking for stuff like this. Like, please give us something. Please give us a movie night. I don't care what movie it is. I want to go to a movie. Is everyone going to be masking there? Please, we want to go to a pottery thing. I don't care where it is. I will drive an hour to get there. And so, in a lot of ways, it's build it and they will come. Um, and the more, this is a good thing, I think, the more events are like this, it's not just build it and they will come, but how, are you consistent? What are you doing to provide other mitigations? What are you doing to build trust in your community? And so, the code aware community is not a monolith, as we know, but I think most people want to support events like what we're doing, what you're talking about. And I know specifically in New York, there's a wonderful organization called Positive Defiance, if you've heard of them, and they're awesome. And I've talked with them multiple times, and we're both getting ready to launch our shows. And we're kind of we don't work together, but we throw ideas back and forth. And I think it's a mutual respect observation that we're having each other. It's really fun to see what they're doing and the turns of the dial that were a little different, but far UVC, required masking, open air, they're doing it. And it's really cool to see that happen in New York specifically.
Yeah, I definitely like the name has come up, and they're definitely somebodies that I should poke. So thank you
Oh
for
yeah, you'd love them. They'd
yeah.
love to talk to you. They'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, and you've mentioned a couple times plus life testing, which is a pretty common brand in the COVID aware community, is it precisely because it is fairly well known among people who are conscious of it as one of the better tests.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the States these days, it is a little bit hard to get. Um,
Yep.
yeah, do you want are you able at all to go into like why that tends to be preferred and or like if you found any ways to access it given how hard it is these days in the States?
I was lucky enough to grab a machine and some tests like the month before it stopped becoming available in the States. And last I heard, I haven't seen it turn the page on it yet, was October or November is when the pet tests were going to be available again. And the pet tests are the same thing as the human tests, they're just marketed different. But the machine, from what I understand, is going to need to be formatted, and the FDA said that would need to happen. And please correct me if I'm wrong, anybody listening to this, but it sounds like that's going to be a little while still. I know that there are people that are trying to make it happen other ways of getting the tests to the states and people that are schooled in that way. But what I know about Plus Life specifically is, Metric was great. We of course have antigen tests, and Lucira was the next best, then Metrics after that. And then Plus Life, the benefit of that is you are able to see if there is, heaven forbid, an infection that's starting days earlier than you would normally see it with the graph and the little line that's creeping up underneath the control line. So that's a visual in a way that doesn't exist in the other tests ahead of time.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you so much for that because that is like very important. Like testing is it mostly gives you data, but it's data you can act on and knowing like what the best
Yep.
tests out there are, you know,
Yep.
if you're going to go rapid antigen tests, which are often shortened to RAT, because we like our gross acronyms. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like FlowFlex tends to be one of the better ones. They do tend to
Yep.
be some of the slightly more expensive RAT tests, so like for my mask block, oftentimes we unfortunately just can't afford the FlowFlex test because we're buying in bulk and we need to find what's
Yeah.
affordable in bulk. But if you can get like, if a rapid antigen is what you can get, and you can get the FlowFlex, go for that. Like you said, plus life metrics, etc. And they're just one tool, but they can be something where you can say, hey, okay, like, oh, so and so is positive, like let's scramble or whatnot.
Yep.
Yeah, are there any other? We've covered UVC, air purifiers, masks, which N95s are some of the best. KN95s if that's what you can afford, etc.
Mhm.
Is there anything else that like you found useful in terms of layering those mitigations for events or whatever else?
Yeah, for a lot of, for some of my work outside of clean air events, where it started with Far UVC was my wedding DJ business that I have, where I'm in an N95 the entire time. I eat in my car. I'm the mask guy at weddings. While people, I swear to you, will do toasts and families are crying, saying we got through the pandemic together. Where I'm sitting around looking, and I'm like the one guy in a mask in this place, right? It's a very out of body experience that I have all the time. Life is surreal. But I find that, for these, CO2 monitor, for example, right? Or net four here. For people are in that when people are in that situation, and it's people who don't mask, don't test, aren't kind of like checked out of the ongoing pandemic years ago, what I find is this is the best visual tool to advocate for myself in those situations. So, for example, if I'm in a room and dancing is happening and I'm keeping a track on this, right? And it goes up to like 1500, 1700, it's creeping up there, right? Sweaty and it's getting hot in there and it turns red. I will show this to the wedding planner. Now, before that happens, I will tell them about this, and they're kind of listening, but don't really care. Doesn't mean anything. But something about when it gets red and this inverts, where it's a black background and white numbers, that does something to people's psyche where they all of a sudden say, we have to open a window right away. What do we do? and I say you open a window right away. So that's how I advocate for myself, is having something that's visual. The tools to mitigate are great. What is the little data metric point that's easy and just like copy and paste? And I think it's this, the biggest bang for your buck in communicating to people who might not be tuned into the intricacies of what it takes to get safe, but no one likes a big red light and and a black background. It's the universal oh shit. So that works.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that back up because, like even for somebody like me who like I tried to make sure I'm well versed on like, okay, these are the best masks. Here's how to, fit test if you can, which not everybody can, unfortunately, etc. You know, um, those little CO2 monitors still kind of sometimes throw me for a loop where it's like, okay, like what are the good numbers again? What are the bad numbers? So like
Yeah.
for the Aranet at least, it sounds like there's also the visual scale in terms of colors. But are you able to talk about okay, like what are good numbers, what are bad numbers, so to speak, etc.
Totally. So it's generally thought that between 400 and 600 is really good because that's outside. If you take it outside, you're hanging out like at a pumpkin patch, or we had a COVID aware meetup the other day at a pumpkin patch, and people have their airnets and everyone says like 595 or 620 or something like that. And usually 620 because someone just started speaking right next to it, right? So it's picking it up right there. If you get to 1,000, that's when I kind of start looking at it and thinking like, okay, so we're not outside. We don't have outside level air anymore, but it's not horrible. And I'm wearing an N95 and I feel there's air movement, or I have brought a fan or small far UVC thing, so I'm okay with that. But when it gets up to that kind of like 1,500, 2,000 mark, then that's kind of my call to action in a lot of ways. So what I will do at weddings specifically is I will look for the windows ahead of time when I go and visit, and I'll just go open them and I won't ask, right? We talked about not asking permission, just like open the windows. And I hear people like, why are the windows open in here? It's like December. What's going on here? And they'll close them and I'll go open them again. So you just kind of have to like advocate for yourself, right? And so um, if that's something, and not everyone's comfortable doing that, but I really just encourage people to try to get to that point where you can stick up for yourself in that situation and know that you're not wrong. You're early, as the idea goes, but I like to say like right on time. And you're a leader in that situation. So sometimes leaders don't have to ask for permission. Leaders just have to lead. And if you're there and you're the only one that is masking and trying to keep yourself safe, then what does that look like throughout the whole night if that's your priority? Yeah.
Yeah, this has been so amazing, and I won't keep you too much longer because you have been very generous with your time. But thank you again. And is there anything else you'd like to plug? Anything else you'd like to say before we say goodnight?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. Thanks for having me. And this is great. I love talking shop, and I think what you're doing here is awesome. I hope your listeners feel validated listening to you. I hope for people who are stumbling on this podcast, they learn a lot because you have a lot to teach people. If you guys want to learn more about Clean Air Events, you can go to cleanairevents.com, on Instagram at Clean Air Events, on Twitter at Kirby Crackle. And so that's where I talk all this shop. I'm very active on TikTok, actually. That's where I'm most active, at account Homeschool Rock Dad, which started about homeschool stuff and being a traveling musician, and now is just clean air everywhere. So I do behind the scenes shows of videos of how I set up my shows, why I do them a certain way. Just talk through just the logistics of being a COVID aware person in an ongoing pandemic, the highs and the lows, and everything in between of that.
I feel that, and that is amazing. Thank you again so much, and keep up the amazing work. And I hope you have a lovely night.
Thank you very much. You too.